the year that they were all born and the year that they passed. We all have that dash in common. When I looked at it, I realized that it was that dash where life was. So everything good happened in that dash. Their purpose was in that horizontal stroke. All the lessons that I learned, joys and laughter and tears and arguments, and just come to this aha. That's what life is in the dash. I have to find a way to make the best of it in the dash.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Care So Much. I am so excited for today's guest. She is Dr. Geneva Williams. She's a vibrant life coach. She's a speaker, podcaster, author, and so much more. Our topic today, the dash, which is making life happen by design. So there's so many exciting things within that I cannot wait to talk more about with Dr. Geneva. But without further adu, Dr. Geneva.
Well, first of all, I just want to say, Lillian, thank you so much on being on Care So Much. You know, I have spent a lifetime caring and being with other people who care so much, so passionately about a variety of things. So being on a podcast like this is just a joy. So I want to congratulate you and thank you for bringing forth this kind of conversation. It's really, really great. And so that's a perfect really segue into when you say, tell you a little bit about me, because I grew up in a very small town on the Jersey Shore. My sister and I used to always think that the adults in the community would have a meeting on us all the time because they knew about us. They always asked us questions. They seemed to be always in our business. And later on, I found out that it wasn't this conspiracy that my sister and I really thought about that it was when we were younger. What it was a community consensus among adults that caring for young people, for children, was optimal, was the best thing to do to help them grow up and be successful. And so this whole caring community feeling and spirit was a part of my upbringing. And then my parents were civil rights activist. Well, my mom they were ordinary people though. My mom was a school teacher and my dad was a government worker, but they were very much active in the community, very much focused on the areas of housing, employment, and education. My dad, in fact, took a housing discrimination case to the state Supreme Court after very long years of fighting for it and won. And so it was a landmark case in New Jersey. So I learned leadership and what it means to speak, to talk, to, express all of that at a very young age. So Lillian, the combination of this caring community where I understood and learned that adults placed high value in caring. They cared so much for their children, combined with the activism and leadership that I learned from my parents, just put me on the road that I'm on today. So it's been a road of nonprofit leadership, community, working in with organizations and neighborhoods to make life better, to my now entrepreneurship journey, where again, I'm continuing to try to help people with their personal growth and development so that they can live a vibrant life and do good in the community for themselves and others.
Every time that I hear more about you, I'm astonished and impressed and just like astonished that you would come on my little podcast and come talk to me, which
I came because of the title. I'm telling you what you do, because as you can hear, it's part of my DNA. So I love it. And I think more and more people should be into the business of thinking about, reflecting on, and speaking about what they care very much about.
That's absolutely the reason that I started the podcast. But this idea of the dash, which is something that you talk
Yes.
about a lot on your website, you've got a lot of details in there
Yes.
as to what that is. I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
I mentioned what my career was about in my earlier days. And one of the dreams that I had, although I'd been in nonprofit world forever, it seemed, and was, working with so many people, transforming neighborhoods and communities and raising millions of dollars for community issues. I always had a dream of having my own business, being an entrepreneur. And so I finally decided I wanted to do it. I hung out my shingle. I was so excited. I would now have my own platform where I could carry out my caring message and how you can, how it's good for business, how you can strategically implement it, how caring for others helps you in your life, and all those things. A couple months. So I decided to, start this dream that I'd always have in my late 60s. A few months after I hung out my shingle, my husband got his first diagnosis of cancer.
Mm.
And shortly thereafter, my mom got sick and died, and my husband passed, and my dad passed, all within a year or so of each other. That sent me into a deep, deep depression, grief, you can imagine, because I lost the only people in my life, those three people that I could depend on, who were there always without question, and that unquestionable support and love. And it was the first time I'd ever experienced in my life. And I wasn't a young chick no more. Like I said, I was in my late 60s. So it was really a deep experience for me. And while I was going through all of that, and I was really, Lillian, in deep grief, and I had a habit of almost nightly crying, trying to figure things out, and I really couldn't. And I had really lost my voice. I didn't, really, have that passion, that desire, after years and years and years of always giving, and being out there and advocating and speaking and leading. And, that was me. Just wasn't my career, because I just didn't do a job. It was always my passion. It was gone. I lost it. And I was deep in darkness. But one night when I was, grieving, praying, on my knees, crying, I had the obituaries of these three people who meant so much to me. And I, was looking at these writings, and of course, which I had looked at 1,000 times. But this night, I'm looking at the obituaries, and I noticed the dash, the horizontal stroke between the year that they were all born and the year that they passed. And not only was it something, this horizontal stroke, that each of them had in common, but of course we all have that dash in common, or will. And I when I looked at it, I realized that it was that dash where life was, where meaning was, where purpose was. So everything good that I remembered about these three individuals happened in that dash. Their purpose was in that horizontal stroke. The meaning of life, their contributions, what they made, their legacy, all the lessons that I learned, all my, joys and laughter and tears and arguments and, ups and downs, all of my interaction was in that dash with them. And as I'm looking at this dash, I just come to this aha, and I say, that's what life is in the dash. And
Mhm.
I have to find a way to make the best of it in the dash because I didn't
Mhm.
want to be on that other side of the dash. And those three people that I love didn't want me to be on that other side of the dash. They wanted me to be in the dash where meaning and life and purpose and love and everything exist.
Mm.
And so I began my journey of discovering the meaning of the dash, recognizing that there were changes in my life and the things that I had to hold on to and the things that I had to let go, and how could I reinvent myself, because I knew that I still wanted to have that, be in the dash and be active and still be alive.
Mhm.
And so the reinvention and reimagining of my life that had to occur, I had to grab that. And and I did, and I, came out of it. And in fact, I, you know, renamed my company Dr. Geneva Speaks, because I
Mm.
found my voice. And I knew that speaking out, speaking up, speaking about, speaking for, speaking with, all of that was part of my dash.
Yeah.
And so finding that was so very important. So, you know, I learned that, you know, life has many ups and downs. It's not a new lesson for any of us. We all
Mhm.
face ups and downs and challenges. It's really about how you deal with it. And so, this whole idea of our personal growth and development, so that we can capture and own the strategies and the tips and the tricks and the resources that allow us to make the most that we can out of life and live a vibrant life. And so I began that journey. That's the dash for me.
That's so incredible. I think I'm not somebody who likes to romanticize things like depression and mental health. It's a struggle
Mhm,
that I've had
mhm,
as well. But
mhm.
I think the piece that I do find a lot of beauty in, and it seems like you have as well, is the meaning that you find to get out of that dark place. It's
Mhm,
the
mhm.
thing that gives you the ability to get out of that. And so often it is those things like community, finding the things that actually matter in life. That has been
Right.
something that I know for me, I've had some of my own mental health struggles, and they kind of peaked and came to this head during the pandemic
Mhm,
when
mhm.
everything got quiet and we didn't really
Right.
have an option to do anything other than
Mhm.
the most important things. This idea of intentionality and really defining what those priorities are. You talked about the idea that that life lives in the dash, and figuring out what those good things.
Well, one of the things that I know happened through this experience I
Mhm.
had was the personal transformation that I went through taught me the value and the hope in reinvention,
Mm.
and how we can uh, not only reinvent ourselves, but reimagine any future that we want. And it's interesting, Lillian, because in my work with organizations and communities and neighborhoods, in helping people transform their communities, you know, get better schools, get better resources for children, end homelessness, and the myriad of thousands of community and social problems that I worked on through my career, there was always this transformation. And
Mm.
I would work with people and develop the skills. And of course, my academic training was in this as well, but develop the skills to vision and set goals and put together action steps and be accountable for the goals, and the best way to monitor and get feedback and assess yourself, and all of these various tools and techniques that I use in community transformation work, I realize that it also applies in personal transformation in many, many ways. And so, what I do now is work with entrepreneurs and executives and leaders in particular, women in particular, on their personal growth and development in the areas of, first of all, of course, knowing yourself, being able to envision your own future, your own action. You have the power and the worth to do that. And here's how we can, work together to build your next steps, so that you can confidently move into your purpose, so that you can, with self assuredness, live the life that you want to live. And so these were the things that I had worked for years with communities on and organizations about how we, in fact, we can change the situation of homelessness in our community. We can, in fact, make sure that every child is immunized. We can stop lead poisoning and on and on. Those were the social issues, Lillian, I worked with hundreds of individuals and organizations on to transform how communities are and to solve the problems in communities. Well, many of those same things I discovered were transferable in working with entrepreneurs and executives and leaders who, where it's very important that their own personal growth and development is what they want to see happen and how they want to improve their lives. Because why I care so much is because, and particularly for women who are so influential, have been influential, care for our families and our children. And I believe the future is women, the future is female. It's so important for us to be good inside ourselves, so that we can continue our nurturing, caring, creative, innovative spirits that we have, because we influence always by just our presence. We influence so much. We influence children. We influence what happens every day. We influence what happens in education. We are influencers just because of our caring ability. And so I believe that we must operate at the optimal level, which starts with ourselves, who we are, before we can, in fact, perform at an optimal level as influencers in the world. So that's why it's important to me, because I believe that the way to best, you know, have your influence, make a difference, is to find ways that you can grow and improve yourself in the ways that you want to see happen, particularly for women who are so influential.
One thing in particular that I think is interesting is this emphasis that you put on how this is different for women and how you particularly focus on women. And something that I have recently learned about myself that I think is an experience that is common for other women as well is I need to figure out what I actually want moment. I hadn't realized how much of the things I was working towards was about what I thought I should be doing as opposed to what I actually wanted, the things I actually wanted to achieve. And within this idea of kind of understanding and knowing your own power, then the ability to see that and harness that with this intentionality of figuring out what it is that you want.
This is so critical, I think, to living your most vibrant life. That is figuring that out for yourself. Lillian, as I was a leader in so many organizations before I started my business, starting out, I didn't realize so much the importance of self-awareness. after a while, as I started working on it and developing it, that really became my leadership style. People would ask, what's your leadership style? And they'd expect all these, wonderful theories and analytics and all that kind of stuff. And again, I studied all that. My doctorate is in leadership.
Mm,
But I think the very first thing about your leadership style has to be knowing you, yourself,
mm,
self awareness. And that's the first step in my 5-step formula that
mm,
I work with women on. And that first step is be aware. And
mm,
that is where, you really develop this greater sense of self awareness, direction, a mindset towards your future self. And in that, you stop living others' expectations. So that very first step that we spend a lot of time on is this self-awareness, where in fact I help others learn how to revise and reimagine your life, discover your most important values, which is so key
mm,
to figuring out your purpose. And the whole thing about, well, why are you here? Which is
mm,
what I really went through. And in discovering my dash, that was a question
mm,
that I asked myself, well, why am I here? And so I developed some systems and steps to help women answer those questions and discover that, because that helps you get to your meaning and your purpose. And I um, used a number of things that I learned in running businesses and analyzing strengths and discovering talents and skills and assessment and our accomplishments, and all of that in that first critical milestone in getting to your most vibrant life is be aware,
mhm,
becoming, what, who you are. And that's the first step before you can take any other steps, like building a plan for yourself. I very much believe that we can craft and should develop a game plan, a strategy for our life. And another step is how we learn to boost our confidence, because I think we as women achieving even higher levels of confidence and getting rid of and defeating that self doubt and that imposter syndrome that can creep up and those limiting beliefs. We really need to be intentional about boosting our confidence. And then so many of us, in another step in my formula that's, time tested,
mhm,
um, from, over this close to, 60 years plus of experience, is the need for us to beat our communication fears that
mm,
we have, that oftentimes we as people in general suffer often from speaking anxiety, whether it's speaking in front of a crowd, speaking to your loved one, but expressing your authentic self. And so that's one of the milestones that I work with women entrepreneurs and executives and leaders on, whether it's, you're at the podium or you're in your bedroom or you're in a conference room, that being able to reduce any communication anxieties that you have is an important piece. And then finally, the last step, which really in my 5-step formula, which is probably the most important once you come to, going through the other steps, is being well. Be your
mm,
vibrant self. And that's something, Lillian, that I finally got to as I was, discovering and reimagining myself and my dash. I decided that, well, one of the things I wanted to do was not only continue to live long,
mhm,
okay, and we all want to do that, but I wanted to live long vibrantly. I
mm,
mean, I wanted to, look good, feel good, and continue to do good in the community. And so I do a lot of conversation about that, have a lot of strategies about doing that, because I think we can embrace that at any age, and that we can have a vibrant life. And we should be, because there's different stages of life that you're in. And particularly as women, um, we have those milestones and stages in life that we go through, and we have to be prepared for each one of them. And you can prepare yourself. You can, life is going to happen. There's going to be those ups and downs. There's going to be, when you hit your 50s, there are going to be some life changes you ain't never seen before. And you can't even imagine them. Trust. Uh, but there can be this development of a game plan and strategies and resources that you can, in fact, put into your portfolio, develop your game plan so that you can figure out what's best for you and how you can live vibrantly for yourself and for others. So it's a process that I go through, and women come to me at different parts, at different points in their life. And so sometimes we'll put more emphasis on one milestone than we will on another. Everyone starts with the be aware milestone. Being, having some clear understanding of who you are, what you want, why you're here, what are your values, uh, um, how you can resist limiting beliefs so that you can be your best self. What are your talents, skills, and accomplishments, etc. That is a mandatory first step that we do. And then depending on where someone is, we can, put more or less emphasis on those other areas. And then, so I teach that to private clients and work with people one-on-one, and I work in nonprofits and in corporations where there are women on staff who, can benefit from learning how to live a vibrant life, how you can, I care about your personal growth. That's what I found out as a leader, whether you're at home or at work, as an entrepreneur, your personal growth and development matters.
As you describe this way that you help people find themselves, I think about the leaders that I've known in my work experience, which has primarily been in corporate America. But it's the leaders that I liked and respected the most, the ones that were the most helpful to me in my career. And I feel like I grew the most and delivered the best work for, were the ones who I felt like understood themselves and understood what they were asking of me, and were able to clearly had the direction they wanted us to go. And we were working together to get there. My very first boss, who totally spoiled me, my first week working for him, he pulled me into a conference room and was like, where do you want to go and how can I help you get there? Whether that's here or somewhere else, I always want to keep that in mind. And it was the first time somebody had asked me that in a way that felt genuine. That just really, really resonated with me there.
Yeah, and I think that's the example of someone who really knows him or herself, is aware, has that self-awareness, has that confidence to understand that it's not just about them, it's really about you and us, and how they can help. And it's interesting because when you work in a corporate world or you work in business, you're always talking about vision and goals, and what do you want out of life? And you're asked by someone like that. That's what is important to apply to your personal life. And so that as companies spend millions of dollars figuring out their vision and mission and putting together goals and doing SWOT analysis and all of that, those things are in fact transferable to what you can and should do in your personal life. And that's what I help people with, trying to figure out, well, what are the goals that you want to achieve and how do you go about that? And I've developed my own SWOT
Mm-hmm.
analysis. Mine's stands for a little something different. Those are the kinds of things that we can do when we're intentional about our personal growth.
I know that you've mentioned kind of throughout this that you really focus on women. And I think
Mhm.
in terms of leadership, there's a lot of obvious reasons why women may need a different approach, but I'm curious as to why you focus on women, what challenges you think women face that are somewhat unique that require a different approach
Mhm.
than generic leadership
Mhm.
coaching.
A couple of things. Well, first of all, let me say that many of my clients are males.
Okay.
And I have several male private clients, as well as much of the consulting that I do with nonprofits and corporations are with men. So let me
Mm-hmm.
just say that. That's one. Secondly, why my focus is on women executives, entrepreneurs, and leaders is, well, first of all, I can relate.
Mm-hmm.
And in my work, at least my style, uh, that authenticity and ability to relate and connect is very important. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
part of it. I think, secondly, I do believe that um, women are natural influencers because of our roles that we carry. And thirdly, it is because of those many, many, many roles that we carry. Our unique challenges have to do with our caregiving responsibilities that we typically have. That
Mm-hmm.
is either a young child or an adult or a family member, etc., taking care of the household, etc., etc., etc. And that we as women tend to burn our candles at both ends. And I know that was my experience coming through my career. And so I had to develop various strategies and resources in order to deal with that. So we face higher rates of burnout. We tend to wear multiple hats. We also tend to not have the greatest amount of resources at our fingertips. We have trouble getting access to capital. We have
Mm-hmm.
difficulty breaking into those networks for not just mentorship, but sponsorship, et cetera, et cetera. And so all of those, and then oftentimes we're the first and only. We're the
Mm-hmm.
first woman, or we're the only woman of color in the room,
Mm-hmm.
or, and this first and or only status presents a whole variety of unique challenges for us as women. I was a first and only many, many times. I
Mm-hmm.
was the first and only woman of color president of United Way in our area. I was the first Black female chair of the Western Michigan University board. I was, so I could go on and on. I was the first. And oftentimes when I started my career in United Way, there were no people who looked like me. Okay. So I was the first and only in a room
Mm-hmm.
most times. And so that presents a whole series of unique challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, Lillian, I also was very young. So I'm talking in my late 20s, 30s. By the time I was in my early 40s, I was head of United Way in our community. So these first and
Mm-hmm.
onlys, they happen to women in this male dominated world. And because I've been there and have, all the scars and everything to prove it, and been through all of that and learned an awful lot. You know, you can't have a testimony about this unless you have a test. And I have
Mm.
been tested, tested, and tested over and over again. So I've had that long lived experience. So when I talk with women leaders, it's
Mhm.
not just the academic or the theoretical, although I do have my academic credentials. It's more the practitioner, because I've been there. This is your auntie,
Mhm.
and I've been there. And let me tell you what's going on. And here are here's lots of strategies that you can use. And all of them I done tried and tested one time or another. Many failed in, and found the success in the things that work. So when I talk about strategies, et cetera, I'm talking about what works, and
Mm.
what works and has worked for me as a female leader, entrepreneur, author, auntie, all of that.
Mhm.
And so I feel that the most wisdom, strategies, resources, and advice that I can give best
Mhm.
is for female women executives, entrepreneurs, and leaders. Not, not only, but the best that I can give is there.
Mhm.
So that's why I do what I do.
My mom is a engineer. She got her master's degree at Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
And she is often the first woman in the room. I grew up on stories of what that looks like.
Exactly.
There's one of the things that she would say to me a lot is like, you can't ever say that the reason you're not going to do something is because you're a woman, because that gives them an excuse to say you can't do something because you're a woman.
Mm-hmm.
I was just having a moment of being particularly
Mm-hmm.
grateful for women like you and my mom who were out there being those first women in the room and were able to come back and be like,
Mm-hmm.
here are
Mm-hmm.
the things that worked. Here are the things
Right.
that didn't
Right.
work.
And often we, as, I know when I was coming through, there were very few networks of women, and
Mm,
not much. I mean, there are more now, of course, but still, that's a unique challenge for women. And that is seeing other women and
mhm,
having access to women as role models, as mentors, as sponsors, et cetera.
mhm,
And, getting into being able to get into networks of other women. That's still a challenge. As I came along, it was almost non-existent.
mhm,
Um, but there are ways, and because of that, I had to develop some strategies like finding, a woman, at least
mhm,
one, who I can, hang on to, and, you know, um, uh, drink all of that goodness, etc., reading books, following certain
mhm,
people,
mhm,
not following in the way that we follow today,
mhm,
because, I'm talking 40, 50 years ago, but, following in the ways that we did then, and doing a lot of reading and books. And then a lot of it was, again, trial and error. And
mhm,
that's, Lillian, what I've brought forth today in the work that I do, the small piece that I can
mhm,
contribute. And that is, the strategies, techniques that I learned then, they work today. And
mhm.
particularly for women who are trying to figure out, well, how can I find my purpose and meaning? How can I succeed in my business? How can I grow myself in my
Yeah.
business so that I can live a vibrant life, so that I can travel, so that I can spend time with my children, so that I can do the things that I've always wanted to do? Because you can, I believe you can, at any age.
You've talked a lot about being a woman, and you mentioned a couple of times within there that you are a woman of color. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering how race and the intersectionality of those identities has potentially added additional layers of complexity within some of these first and onlys, and the ways that you've navigated some of those things.
Well, again, the isms are alive, still alive. They
Mm-hmm.
may look a little different, but racism, sexism, and ageism. Okay,
Mm,
because for me, again, when I started out, I was that young thing. that young girl, you know. And so that was there. And those things still continue today. In fact, I get it on the other side, like, why don't you go sit down someplace? Why haven't you retired? So those isms are still there, and they happen at any age. One of the strategies that I found effective was that, well, it's a couple of things. First, I think it's very important to know your values. What is important? So I was raised in a family that spoke out and up all the time. I remember so distinctly one day when I went home to complain to my parents. I was in middle school, and I went home to tell my parents that the teacher was teaching some stuff, and there was a book that we were reading that really wasn't uh, portraying African Americans in a way that I knew to be, and being proud of my heritage. And I didn't like what the teacher was saying, what was in the book. And my parents said to me, okay, well, here's what we want you to do. We want you to go to school the next day, and we want you to stand up and tell the teacher and speak out about it. And I was like, what? I was more concerned about what the other kids were going to say. I said, what the other kids going to say? And no, I can't do that. But they were real clear that that's what they wanted me to do. And so, it was, how it is. I was going to do what they said for me to do, because I needed to do that. And I was scared to do it, but I ended up doing it and standing up and speaking out, really very nervous. But I was really surprised at the reaction, because the teacher really listened to me and talked to the rest of the class that understood. And then afterwards, the kids thought I was cool. Nice. So I had some early experiences with those speaking out, but I had no choice because my parents absolutely believed that I had a responsibility, that people had a responsibility to speak up and speak out. So one of the things that I think is so important when you're in those situations is to know your values and what's important, because you are going to be challenged on speaking up, speaking out. So you have to make those decisions, and knowing what your values are is very important. So I think knowing that your values can help guide you in those ism situations. And I think secondly, recognizing that racism, sexism, ageism, is, it's probably going to be in the workplace, in society for a while, even though we're seeing so many advances happening. In some cases, things are just the same. Particularly for us as women of color, the question is, how are you going to move forward?
Yeah.
And how do you figure those things out? And oftentimes I will have women who face these issues, which really, after imposter syndrome, this is the second issue that women present to me when I'm coaching them. That is these isms at the workplace. And so what we do is we also go through a series of practicing what to say and when to say. So one of the techniques I use in my work is scenarios. So we go through some scenarios, hypothetical situations. What would you do if da 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 happened? And we actually go through that back and forth, and we figure out some solutions, and we practice communicating. And I have found this to be an effective technique, and a technique that is unique about my practice and what I do, because I have such experience. I can take folk through scenarios and really, deal with the practical, because most of the scenarios that they come up with, I've been through, and that's real.
Yeah.
And so, that's real. And so, but that's the way that I work, particularly with women of color and any woman who is
Mm-hmm.
facing any one of those isms at the workplace or in, in society in terms of what they're doing.
I'm just thinking about some examples of my own life. If I had been, because it's sneaky and it's fast and it happens at a seemingly nowhere sometimes, and really having clear, know what your values are, practice what you're going to say, like those sorts of things,
Exactly.
because it ends up being an emotional situation. It ends up
Absolutely.
being, it happens so fast, and then you go, what just happened just now? So that sounds really helpful.
I do this also. I found this technique very good also when I work with women who have, who really want to find a work-life balance, which
Mm-hmm.
I often think is a question of setting boundaries and learning when to say no and how to
Mm.
say yes.
Yeah.
Because, it's really both sides, saying yes to what's important to you, saying no to what is not. And one of the things we do, I have like 4, 5, or 6 phrases that you can use to say no, let's say very graciously.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and besides just use the word no,
Yeah.
but 2 or 3 phrases, and we actually, um, women I work with will create them and they practice them,
Nice.
and
Yeah.
so when the situation comes up, you can, I won't be able to join you this time, but please let me know the next time you schedule something.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and ways that, you can say that. And so those are some
Yeah.
techniques that we use. But my working with, women, whether, one on one or in the corporate world or entrepreneurs, is very authentic, practice based.
Mm.
So I give real techniques that people can take and use,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
actually use.
That's so helpful because there's a lot of rhetoric out there that's like about this mindset, which is so important.
Mhm.
Figuring out the mindset is important, but then figuring out how to take that and turn it into practical things is
Exactly.
difficult.
Exactly. Exactly. That's right.
Part of some of the things that you teach is this idea, and I think it connects really well with the setting boundaries thing you were talking about, which is simplifying your life. And I think that
Mhm.
people might think that the idea of having a vibrant life and simplifying your life as contradictory, but
Mm.
I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit and just explain why simplifying your life is so important as a part of living a vibrant life.
My view is that, first of all, it's important to define what for you is a vibrant life. Like,
Mm,
my idea of a vibrant life is probably different than yours. And
mm,
then my idea of a vibrant life at the age I'm at was different than it was when I was 50 or
mm-hmm,
30. Okay. And so I think the first step is for us to be real intentional about defining what a vibrant life is.
yeah,
And once you define that, then okay, so how do I get that vibrant life? And, kind of figure out, and what are the indicators that I have this vibrant life, that I have in my head, this vision, this dream that I have, and putting together then the action steps for that. And once you do that, it'd be simple. you know,
mm-hmm,
I mean, really, it is simple for me. I decided again that I wanted to look good, feel good, and do good at my age. I wanted to continue. So then I said, okay, well, what does look good mean?
mm,
And so I said, well, it's just not a physical appearance. So physicality is very important. So you need to keep up your skin care and how you look, how you dress, and all of that's important. It also has a lot to do with, um, your inner confidence
Mm.
and how you can boost that confidence and have that ooze out of you, and the feeling good, of course, is the physical. And so for me, exercise is a regular part of my life. Working my body, moving is a
Mm.
very intentional part of my life, and being healthy and feeling good also, in my view, Lillian, has to do with understanding and knowing your why and your purpose, because
Mhm.
if you do, you can feel good about your life. And then, of
Mhm.
course, the doing good is, the advocacy, the speaking up and speaking out, and the legacy and what you do, doing good for yourself, but really doing good for others, and getting involved in those issues that you care so much about, and whatever that is, and however you decide to do it. So the simplicity,
Mm.
Lillian, is that if you two things of it. One is that if you define it for yourself, it's and figure out how you're going to get it, it can be simple in
Mm.
life. It could just be something you do. And then the other side of it is there are so many easy, simple things we can do every day to, something as simple as just, stopping and taking deep breaths, walking outside, take 15 minutes, picking up the phone, calling a friend, writing a letter, doing a puzzle, pulling out your coloring book. I'm a freak about coloring books. So I have coloring books, and I have my pencils already, my coloring pencils set up. I have the book lying on my desk. So if I want to say, no, let me
Yeah.
take a simple break, go over for 10 minutes, pull out that pencil and just color.
Mm.
We can create easy, simple things to do, to put in our life. Everything don't have to be complicated. Life is complicated enough. So you
Mhm.
can build in simplicity into your life. Easy stuff. Stopping in the morning. It was funny, my best friend at one time, I was just talking to her, and I was saying, oh, I've got so much to do, and my morning routine and that. She said, you know what? She said, what you need to do is just stop and just get yourself a cup of tea and sit down. She said,
Mm.
what is 10, 15 minutes going to do but give it back to yourself?
Yeah.
So you just do it, the simple, and just breathe, because it's gonna be all right, Lillian. It really is gonna be all right. It's gonna be all right tomorrow. It really is.
Mm. Wow. I now have that recorded so I can play it for myself every morning.
Okay, good.
There's so many things you said today that I'm going to spend a lot of time reflecting on and are so incredible. And
Okay.
for people who are listening to this having the same reaction that I am, which is I'm going to take that little snippet and listen to it every morning, and I'm looking for more Dr. Geneva in my life, what are some ways that people can, let's start with what are some ways that people can work with you?
Well, first of all, anyone can connect with me on social media at Dr. Geneva Speaks. I'm on all platforms one way or the other. And I'm always got my mouth running about some tip, resource, strategy, or something.
Mm-hmm.
So you can connect with me that way. I also do put out a weekly Vibrantpreneur newsletter, and folk can go to my website and sign up for that. So I give tips and strategies and wisdom, etc., at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. And then people can work with me individually.
Mm-hmm.
Again, all that information is on my website, drgenevaspeaks.com. So I do coaching. And then if you're in an organization, I can come in and work with you and others in your organization. If you're an entrepreneur and you run a business, I can do that. I do a lot of speaking as well. And sometimes people have me come in and speak or facilitate meetings or
Mm.
facilitate conversation. Um, and so that's the way people can work with me. I also have a Vibrant Life Blueprint course, and that's another thing. And I've got some ebooks that really are step-by-step guides. One on imposter syndrome, which really talks about the unleashing the fabulous you, and another that talks about how you can create your new you. And these are, I just give some change strategies. And so all of that information is on my website under resources and shop.
Yeah.
And so those, so I what I've become, Lillian, I think in so many ways, more and more of a content creator. So I really like to put out the content. That's because I got so much in my head and in my experience, and I want to share. And that's what I care about.
Well, I can attest to the fact that Dr. Geneva is a great follow. She's got all those great inspirational things that you're looking for. It's always a joy when you pop up in my feed. You're also, if you're looking for some fashion inspiration, she does not take the looking good thing lightly. She's always looking good when she shows up on my feed.
Thank you.
Lots of, as she mentioned, great information on her website. All those links, as per always, will be in the description of this episode. Thank you so much, Dr. Geneva, for coming on today. It has been such a pleasure to get to talk to you and get to experience your passion and your very vibrant energy and all of these wonderful things that you have to share with everyone.
Thank you so much, Lillian. It's been my delight. And again, I want to congratulate you and say how much I appreciate a podcast like this. So having conversation about caring is critical and important to how we progress as a society, I believe. And so you making that contribution, it's a great leadership move. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, for anybody listening to this who is thinking, wow, what a great episode, first of all, maybe share it with a couple of friends who you think may enjoy Dr. Geneva's incredible stuff that she mentioned here. There's also a bunch of other great episodes back in your feed. If this episode was particularly resonant for you because you feel like you don't have some of those boundaries and maybe your life is a little bit less than simple, there's a really great episode I did with Lynn on creative rest, which is all about the idea of creating those boundaries and figuring out, we talked a lot about how we figured out we needed those in our lives and how we were maybe pushing ourselves a little bit too far. And you can find us, as always, across everywhere on social media, Care So Much Pod. If you're out there and you're really passionate about something and you talk about it for hours on end and you feel like you need to be quieter about that passion because people are telling you that they don't want to hear it, or you think that they just don't care, just know that I do. I care so much.